So then in addition to this house being this music school and this opera house, it was an access house. So this was during the time of segregation. So musicians and artists like Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, Cab Calloway, Sarah Vaughan, sports figures like Roberto Clemente, they couldn't stay at the hotels. So they needed a place to stay. So they would stay at the opera house. So that's why this place is like, first of all, isn't that like awesome?
The feeling that must come out of the walls of that place. That is a real artistic bohemian experience. There had to have been things thought and said there that just completely changed the trajectory of not only careers, but the industry as a whole.
It earned the nickname the Mystery Manor because they said that like so many people were coming in and out and all these parties and jam sessions and stuff like that. It was the place. It was a haven,
What I would give to just go back in time and sit in that lobby.
Yeah, me too.
Just
Me
hear
too.
it, you know?
Me too.
Oh. Hello.
There's my friend. How you doing, baby?
How you doing?
Did you get your hair cut?
No, it's just extra dry here in Santa Fe, and it's very fluffy.
All right, very good. That works too.
The desert air, it gives your hair body.
Did you drive there?
Yeah,
Holy moly.
yeah,
With the puppy?
yeah.
How long did that take?
Oh, it took about 5 days because I stopped to see my parents in Texas.
Yeah.
So
Oh
I kind of
my.
broke the trip up. It wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
Now I got two doggies now. So we have our little Jack Russell that's here, and our big guardian dog. So
So how energetic is the Jack Russell?
he's 16. We adopted him. He's a pandemic puppy. So we adopted him like right during the pandemic. And he was 15 when we adopted him. So he's 16 now.
Well, God bless him.
Yeah. He's a
How's
pain
he
in the
seem to
butt.
be doing?
What's that?
How's he doing?
He's okay. It took about a year for him to sort of like get into the groove and accept us.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a Jack Russell, so they're a little crazy.
They're crazy. I like that dog. I like that kind of dog, the Jack Russell.
Yeah.
But I like your dog too. I mean, I like. Yeah, we've got lots of dogs.
Yeah. You said you had like 16 dogs?
We had 12.
12.
And
That's
there's
amazing.
one of them right there. But yeah, no, we like big dogs. But I like the Jack Russell Terrier. They're down for anything.
He'll play fetch until he passes out. He's just really like we
Oh,
have
well,
to
that's
stop him.
really good. That's
'Cause
good behavior.
yeah, because he'll just literally we played fetch with him one time so many times that he had a seizure. So we have to limit it.
Well, better him than y'all. I mean,
That's
that
exactly
means
true.
you're right.
Yeah. Which is possible, especially with Cooperstown. Oh my gosh, it's so warm. How did you end up with 12 dogs?
Because first of all, we live on a farm.
Yeah.
And then our dog had a big litter. We have golden retriever. Let me see if Sophie, I don't know if she'll come here. Had a litter of 11 pups, and it was wild. How you doing, pretty girl?
So you kept the whole family together?
We kept the whole family together. It was wild. I don't know if she. Let me see. Sophie, where'd you go?
Hey, looky there.
Sophie.
Look at that.
Yeah.
So it must be nice to be back with the pack after.
I got back a couple hours ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because my daughter had to start at school yesterday, so I had to get her into the dorm and all this stuff in Boston. So I got back a couple of hours ago, and I'm leaving tomorrow morning. So
Oh my
that's how
goodness.
that goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good to have this moment here. Sit in my chair. In my room, I've got my lazy boy chair. Put my feet up, watch American movie classics, do my email. I'm great.
It is the things like People I think often think that what we do is when we go on like extravagant vacations and do things like that. And man, for me, the best thing in the world is going home and just being in
Yeah,
my space and using my television, you know?
100%. And I think that, because you spend so much time away and all the time on the road, what I want to do, just like you, what I want to do is I want to be home. Like I do that all the time. Well, the pandemic changed things
Yeah.
somewhat, but I have to tell you, I did not miss all the crazy. I mean, I was still crazy because I'm super crazy with a lot of stuff that I'm doing,
Yeah.
but the frenzy of the travel, all that means,
Yeah.
all of that, those things that are out of your control, sitting around in the airport for hours when all of that stuff I don't miss.
Yeah. I had no idea how much life I was missing until the pandemic. And then I was like, wow. And then coming back to it now, I'm just like, this is what I want, right? This is the thing I want. Because what I really wanted is to see my wife and family every day.
Of
So,
course, of
yeah.
course. I understand that. What a beautiful thing to hear. Yeah, I understand that entirely. Yeah, good for you.
Well,
Well, what are we talking
what,
about?
well, I wanted to ask you about your foundation that you've started.
Oh my God. So the thing is, we started this foundation in the pandemic, but I really think that I started this foundation 35 years ago.
Yeah.
I actually really think that my whole life has been about starting this foundation. It wasn't until we really found out about, I mean, it was just a series of divine happenings
Yeah.
that pulled the whole thing together. I know you're not going to remember this, but you and I were together in, I think it was Cincinnati.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did we go to the horse races?
Oh,
Do you remember that?
that must have been Cincinnati, outside of the town.
I went with you one day to the horse races. Anyway, we had a cute little joke, me and you, about Joel Osteen, whom I adore, by the way. But you were saying, like talking about you were imitating his voice and everything.
Don't let him steal your joy.
That's what you said. That's exactly what you said. And do sometimes you're with friends and you have these funny little exchanges and you just don't know what's going to stick and you don't know what's going to resonate. I have had in my ear all these years your voice saying that.
Don't let him steal your joy.
That's right. Can you believe that? So it's been a series of divine happenings and collisions that have brought this thing together. It's a long story, actually, really, Mike. It's a long story because when COVID hit, we got all sent home, and I teach also.
Yeah.
So I'm at Peabody and at Juilliard, and for some of my kids, well, for all of my kids, but particularly the ones who had been out 2 or 3 years, had started to make a name for themselves. I got in touch with them. We all felt terrible. And I just thought, what's going to happen to my girls?
Yeah.
Like they just started making lives for themselves. And now all of a sudden, like, what are they going to do? And so I reached out to them and just trying to see how they were doing and what could I do. And there was one girl in particular who's a great talent, but she was really angry. And she was really angry with me about, why did you encourage me in this very, complicated and narrow field and competitive. And it's so, the chances of being successful in it or so. And she just sort of went off, like all these things that she'd been thinking for maybe a long time. She sort of went off, but it was actually a real blessing to me. And I have felt that anyway, sometimes when I'm in the studio and I'm sitting there and I think, what am I doing? What am I preparing these girls for? Like, what am I sending them out into, right? So that's another conversation. And I created some scholarship funds to help with that, because when you and I started, and I'm a good deal older than you are, but when, the rules have changed, they've flipped the script a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, when they would come through the door and tell me these things about, they have to actually pay to do the engagement, I'd say, what? What do you mean? Like, first of all, there's this competitive process to get it. And then once you get it, you have to pay. Anyway, so they'd been telling me all these different things. And I was so shocked about the direction that the industry was going in. But But anyway, and the cost of education and what that costs, and so this one girl just sort of went off on me about, now look, and there's nothing that you can say to me because you've never been in this situation before. And what are we going to do now? We're considered the super spreaders and this and that. And I just could not get her off of my heart. And I was thinking, I've got to do something. Like, I've got to do, I can't let my kids suffer like this. Like, I'm a teacher, I've got to offer something. And so I came up with this, that's when I came up with this cooking show. And the reason that that happened is because I loved cooking, but sometimes if my kids had a recital or, an audition tour or, preparing for something, I'd have them come to the house, we'd run through their material, I'd invite a few people and I would cook dinner. So I started doing that to try to find a way to engage them and to do something fun that we all like doing and to create a platform where they could still perform and reach a broader audience. So we started that cooking show, Cooking with Denyce, and that was totally spontaneous. That was that had that idea on a Thursday night and we went live on it on Sunday. And so we had like 2 days to pull it together. And we got 250,000 viewers. And so then a friend of mine was like, oh my gosh, because everybody was home.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody was home. We were all trying to figure out what we're going to do. And so that turned into something. But when we started getting so many viewers, I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, Denyce, maybe you should look into a way to try to, make this a profitable business. And there was a guy that I brought in who was doing numbers on it. And I kept telling him what I wanted to do. And he said, Denyce, this doesn't sound like a cooking show. He said, this sounds like something else. Like everything that you're telling me is I really want to do something for my kids. I want this to be a platform where singers feel empowered. I don't want them to have to wait for management. I don't want them to have to wait for like all these things that I kept expressing. He kept saying, we're talking about a cooking show, right? Like this doesn't sound like.
It sounds like a humanitarian program.
Yeah, this sounds like something else. So then there was a student of mine who, a student that I'd worked with who was, okay, so right after that, Francesca got in touch with me. She said, Denyce, there's something I want to do with you. I want to do like a one-woman show with you. And you know how it is in the business, people come to you with projects. Sometimes they happen, many times they don't. And so I said, great, let's do that.
Like, oh, great idea. You're at the center of it.
Right, okay, awesome, great, let's do that. And then I didn't hear anything from her for like 9 months. And so at the end of 2020, there was a student who was singing in Pittsburgh on the steps of the National Negro Opera House, right?
Yeah.
The Mary Caldwell Dawson house that she created. And she talked about this house was dilapidated and was going to fall over. And we have to raise awareness because there's something, we've got to let people know that we've got this great monument there. Yeah. And what people don't know about, well, first of all, people didn't know about Mary Caldwell Dawson. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is that like what this woman was able to do in the time of war was incredible. Like she created jobs and gave jobs to over 1,800 singers. Okay, that was just the singers. And then she got the orchestra and the conductors and the directors and the designers and all this stuff. And she created this opera company. So this house that's still standing in Pittsburgh in the Homewood section was the original home of the National Negro Opera Company. Okay, but then it had many purposes. So she also had a music school. So she went to New England Conservatory, which is a school that I went to. She graduated in 1925. Took her a long time to get a degree because they kept changing the bar and messing with her and all this stuff. Anyway, she got out and she was like, what am I going to do? Nobody would hire her. So her response was like, okay, well, great. I'll create my own opera company. So that was awesome.
What a great model for the modern singer, because that's
exactly. Create your own opportunities, which is what I'm telling my singers all the time. We are not sitting around and waiting for somebody to make it happen for you. We're going to do this thing ourselves. And particularly nowadays, we all found out during the pandemic that, we had to become engineers, right? Mm-hmm. We had to create our own platforms. We could come up with our own programs. We could create our own audiences. And you did need a manager to do that. And you did need an impresario to do that. You would actually do that yourself. And I think that even though things are starting to, open back up again, I think we're going to operate differently. I
hope so. I mean, that's the fervent hope, I mean, one thing you were talking about with your student who was so, who was sort of convicting you about, like, why did you bring me into this? This is a thing that I wonder about with, when we get to a certain point in our careers and we do start to want to give back, right? In some way, whatever that means. And when you get, but at some point, like my experience in this business, it's been a very difficult sort of climb to get here. And through the course of those years, like since you and I worked together back in, the 2000s and stuff, the business has been sort of contracting here and there and getting smaller and stuff. But it seems like there's just a plethora of opportunities that these graduate programs have expanded to have more, turning out more and more students. There's so many paid things. There's so many opportunities for the aspiring class. But that next level up to where there's a career or there's work or there's consistent work for a year, boy, it seems like that gulf has gotten so large. And how do you manage when you're consulting and speaking with these young people? How do you do that without, on one hand, you don't want to be Debbie Downer and like try to convince them this is a terrible idea to do for a living. You want to be encouraging, but you also don't want to encourage them to do something that's going to make them miserable. How do you spread that line?
They say if somebody can be discouraged, then they should be.
Yeah.
You got to have this thing in you. It's one of the lines that we said in the play that it has to come from love, and you have to want to do this more than anything, that if you don't do it, so much that if you don't do it, you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't do anything. Like you have to have this outlet of expression, right? You have to be able to tell this story. And I think you definitely have to have that fire and that burn like in you. You have to really feel like you got something to share and you've got something to say, and that you have something unique, to offer. And so, but I will say this though, Mike, I don't know, I've noticed a real change in the attitudes of people from the time that I grew up. And a lot has to do with the feeling of the American dream, I'm not sure that a lot of people believe in that ideal anymore. When I grew up, when you had a job, you sort of had that job for life. Now everybody's so transient. People are here for 6 months, here for a year, and we see so much constant change. And we're learning, like Mary Cardwell Dawson, that you can't just sing, even those who are successful. You got to have a lot of other things going on too. And that's important also for your well-being. Just like you said earlier, you said, the pandemic made us all pause, get still, look at what we're doing with our lives, because we were also watching the loss of life just go like that, which we know is happening anyway all the time, but we had it in our face, like when they had the meter just ticking like today, and
it does make you feel a little bit like, what am I, there's people dying this is a terrible pandemic and the world's falling apart, and I'm singing 200-year-old music for rich people. It gets a little like, what am I doing this for?
Right. Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it, because you can look at it through that lens. But I also feel like what we're doing, I know you've had this experience where people come up and tell you things like, I heard you sing, and that day I was having like a terrible day, or, I was contemplating, like the point of my life, and I saw you do this and it changed everything for me, or it opened up this incredible, and music definitely, because music is a language. It is a language. It has the power to do that. I was telling someone today that, I'm on the Kennedy Center Artist Committee. And so when we go to the Kennedy Center honors, usually in December, sometimes you're sitting next to a different color. I mean, like you might be sitting next to a blue person or to a red person or somebody that you feel you've got like some feelings about. And then somebody comes out, James Taylor comes out and sings, that's it. And it's over. And you're hugging them, you're holding hands.
You have like communal experience, like this group catharsis. That's what's so great about our language, about this language, is it's a backdoor to empathy. See, I have this same experience when I do veteran shows. Because I've done like 3 or 4 operas on veterans issues. Now, when you do those shows, you have in your audience, you have people from across the political diaspora, because you'll draw in people that aren't your traditional opera audience. So you have these people from completely disparate points of view having a group catharsis and an emotional experience with each other in the same room, breathing the same air, which is problematic with COVID. But for me, like that was one of the tragedies of the pandemic, which is what we are oftentimes is a remedy for this affliction that we have of the lack of empathy in society. And so what we provide for people is a pathway and a space for people from across all different political, religious, cultural identities to come together, have the same experience together.
I'm so happy to be speaking with you. You're so beautiful. I know you. What my perception is that like you're this cool, like cowboy guy. I went to the racetracks with you, and that's how I know you. We were like drinking beers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, you show this other side, and I hadn't seen you for so many years. And then I saw you do Dead Man Walking. I was like, oh my God, that boy has got some serious range and serious depth and serious breadth. Like, you get to know people in one way or on one show or something like that. And you and I have not had a lot of contact, over the years. And then I see you do
days.
yeah. And then I see you do this thing. I'm like, this guy is like tearing it up. He's like crushing it. And then I start seeing your name all over the place. I'm like, oh my God. And then, here I am on your show and talking to you about these things that, you feel. And this is so beautiful. I'm just happy to get to know you. So yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. That was wonderful. But I want to just get back to about this house. So this house, right? The Mary Cardwell Dawson house. So she taught music. Well, actually, she taught many different things because she spoke languages and she was a stage director. So she had this music school. So the house had to be multifunctional, right? It was the opera company. Her husband had this electrical company, electrical repair business on the ground floor. And then she had this music school, and she taught over 600 kids music. Robert McFerrin was one of them, the dad of Bobby McFerrin.
Kidding.
Ahmad Jamal was another one of them. Edward Boatner. She launched she didn't have the career that she thought she was going to have because she was called to a greater and higher, calling. Mm-hmm. What she did was like launch the careers of people and create, who would have thought, if you had asked, me some years ago, like, who do you think was the first woman impresario? Like maybe you would have said Sarah Caldwell or some, no, it was Mary Cardwell Dawson. So then in addition to this house being this music school and this opera house, it was an access house. So this was during the time of segregation. So when these great, musicians and artists like Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, Cab Calloway, Sarah Vaughan, sports figures like Roberto Clemente, they couldn't stay at the hotels. So they needed a place to stay. So they would stay at the opera house. So that's why this place is like, first of all, is that like awesome?
The feeling that must come out of the walls of that place. That is a real artistic bohemian experience. Where you have everybody from all different kind of disciplines coming together, and like, there had to have been things thought and said there that just completely changed the trajectory of not only careers, but the industry as a whole.
It earned the nickname the Mystery Manor because they said that like so many people were coming in and out, and all these parties and jam sessions and stuff like that. It was the place. It was a haven,
What I would give to just go back in time and sit in that lobby.
Yeah, me too.
Just here, Oh.
Yeah, so she was telling about this, and so I got in touch with my students and I said, look, we're going to do a studio project. Everybody's going to sing an aria. We're going to upload it with the hashtag Save the National Opera House. So we started doing that. So because we started doing that, then people started getting in touch with us saying, what are you guys doing? What's this thing about the Opera House? Blah, blah, blah. And then Francesca got in touch with me. She goes, what's going on? Like, what are you doing? I see all the stuff you're doing. She said, remember I said I want to do a one-woman show? I want to do it on Mary Cardwell Dawson. I was like, what? You got to be kidding me. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I can't even believe you're saying this.
That's some voodoo stuff right there.
Exactly. It's all voodoo. It even gets better. So I was like, what? And so she said, I need you to write this letter, this person and this, and call this person. Anyway, then we got the funding for it. So we started like putting it together. It was March and April of this year. And I said, Jessica, like, are we doing this thing or what? She's like, yeah, it's gonna happen. We're gonna work on it. It's gonna, and it got
Like
to be like,
everything else that
man,
happens today,
what are we
the
doing?
last 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then we pulled it off. So then we got involved. So then I started looking at this woman, like you said, who knew about this woman? And it started at the more research we started doing, we started finding out that there were lots of great American heroes who have been erased from the telling of the American story.
Yeah.
So the foundation is focused on this, on hidden figures, on those great hidden figures who have made up the rich tapestry that are these United States, but whose stories have been lost,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've had the career that I've had because of this woman, right? A lot of people would tell you, Marian Anderson, but people don't know that even before that, Mary Cardwell Dawson brought 500 people to the Metropolitan Opera because it was the first time that the Metropolitan Opera allowed an independent opera company to rent the theater. So like they came there and she brought the National Negro Opera House like to the Met, right?
Whoa.
Like way like in the time, like in the 40s, which was crazy. Like nobody even knows that story. And because they,
People would think, I mean, frankly, hearing that, I go, how is that even possible? Right? It seems like an impossibility given the cultural context and historical situation at the time. And it's a miraculous thing that she was able
it
to.
was a miraculous thing that this one woman who was like, barely 5 foot tall was just like this tempest in a teapot and just full of like piss and vinegar. And she was like, we're going to do this thing. We're going to make this thing happen. And her husband was like working with the electrical things, and every dime that they made, went into this company. And then like, as we showed in the play, trying to find venues to perform in is what was difficult because, people that was in the 40s. It was a whole different thing then. And so, trying to get people to allow this all Black opera company to come perform was a huge thing, indoors. And so she was challenged, with this incredible task, and it became the most successful, the longest running, and run by a woman. So like this woman is my hero, right? She is like my hero. We talk about, in particular, if we look at, but not just African-American artists, but, people would probably tell you, Marian Anderson, and there are so many people that came way before her. If you start looking at the Higher Sisters who invented the musical theater idiom, no question about it. You start looking at, Ciceretta Jones, Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, Marisa, like all these incredible artists that we don't know. We know about Caruso, we know about, Björling, we know about Collis, we know about some of these great people, but we don't know about these other people. So the foundation is focused on discovering those hidden figures. And we're going to do that in a number of ways. Like once we discover them and do this research, how are we going to get that folded into the telling of the story? And we're going to do that through our programs. We're going to do that through art. We're going to do that through books. We're going to do that through song. We're going to, do that through the spoken word and all these different things that we're doing that also give singers an opportunity to take charge of their own destiny, and puts them really in the driver's seat. Like they can do the research, they can come up with the programs, and we introduce those to the public schools, to the conservatories, the schools of music, to the museums. And one of the things that I want to do is create exhibits where we could have, and we've got this piece now. We've got this Mary Cardwell Dawson piece that we can take with us, because the Library of Congress has over 11,000 artifacts of hers, costumes, photographs, music, like all this. Yeah. So like to put all that stuff together and take it with a show. And we've got another one we're working on with Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield. And we're working on all these like song cycles and stuff for some of the other ones that we know we won't have a lot of material on.
You're having like almost, you're taking away the sort of like constraints that you have to call something an opera, but you're having like artistic experiences that incorporate the artistic elements. But like it's a whole experience. You're going to walk in through an exhibit and see everything, and then hear the story and tell the story. But that's just jumping off point. That's one of the things I love about new opera. You know, I look at them because they're not long, not 4 or 5 hours. You know, they're 30 minutes to 90 minutes. You know, and in 90 minutes you can't tell the whole story. You can tell a little slice, but it's usually enough to get you hooked. Like if you listen to a really interesting podcast and you go out and do your own research after you hear all these prompts, this becomes like a prompt to make people go out and learn more about these people that you need
Isn't
that have
that
been ignored
beautiful?
by history.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And when people hear the story about her and some of these other people, they're like, what? I didn't know anything about that. That is so interesting. And these incredible people who are, the architects of the careers that we have today. And we didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right. So I find that fascinating. So I say that all of these things were a series of divine, happenings that led me on this path. And I think that this foundation has been in formation for a long, long, long time. And all the pieces are just coming together. And the pandemic, I think, as long as you were healthy, was a gift to us in so many ways, because when I speak to a lot of our colleagues, so many people say it was an opportunity, like you said, to be with your wife, to be with your family, to like really evaluate what you're doing with your life, how you're using your life.
Yeah.
What legacy do we want to leave? Like, what are we doing? Like running from place to place to place to place. What is it that we want to say? And you said earlier about feeling like we want to, give back. And I think that a lot of performers, I think that you have to really be myopic in the very beginning and really just sort of concentrate on what it is you're doing. And I never thought I would be so concerned with other people's careers as I was concerned with mine, like never, until I started working with young people. And I could not believe the level of satisfaction, of gratitude, of how they teach me so much about singing. Like I thought I was going there to do something, but actually, in fact, that what I've received, what they've given back to me is way more than anything I could have ever thought of. And I feel the same amount, if not even more, fulfillment and satisfaction that I would say that I've gotten, from being able to, from being successful and doing the things that I've wanted to do in my career. It doesn't even come close to what I feel about my students.
I find that when I talk to, like, I have mentor relationships with some younger people and a couple of people that I teach and coach and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I find that like in the coaching, in the teaching, in the answering the questions and all that stuff, it forces me to distill my artistic perspective, and it helps me focus my own lens. Because I think for most of us, we don't really know what the hell we're doing most of the time. It really doesn't have a direction. It's just like, well, take the job and go work, And it's not until you have somebody else sort of forcing you to sort of define what your art is that you can actually step back and recognize what you're doing with your craft.
Exactly.
And it really is a gift that they give us. I think maybe start thinking we're going to help these young people and teach them how the ropes, and we don't realize, oh my God, it's a reciprocal relationship.
It's always the other way. It's always the teacher becomes the student. It's always the other way. It's incredible. It's the same way with kids too. That like they parent you in many, many ways. In many ways, I mean, they show you so much about yourself, and you're like, wow, and it all changes and turns over so quickly. Like the generations are so different.
Yeah.
There's and so much happens in a generation's time with how the world changes. I mean, if you think about like the way that we grew up, even when we're little kids, like how different the world is now.
I mean,
Remember when we were little, and again, I'm much older than you, but we used to say like, someday when we talk on the phone, you'll be able to see people.
yeah.
Like someday when we speak on the phone, you'll be able to see. And
science fiction all came true.
It like all came true. It's like the Jetsons, like, oh my gosh, like we're really like you're, in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I'm in Baltimore. Here we are. You're in your house. And like we're talking and having this and feeling too, And so
we're at the generation that we actually know what it's like not to have cell phones on a job. Where you had to get a phone card and like call call another company that would then connect you through. It was like $30 a second, you know, like it was, and like, man, I just take it for granted sometimes that I can just pick up my phone and, you know, out of my pocket and like look at my wife, you
I know. Oh,
know.
oh, that's beautiful, Mike. That's lovely. Yeah, absolutely. It's the technology. I mean, we're certainly in that age of technology where things are just like changing so fast all the time. And you got to be nimble, man. You got to be flexible in order to like keep up.
I was talking. I mean, it's along the veins of Maricopa Dawson projects and this sort of node that you've that's been developing over time that's sort of now blossoming, and it has so many tendrils, you know, to so many different narratives that you can explore, which I think is fantastic. And you know, I'm a big proponent ever since the old Margaret Garner days, a big proponent of modern opera that has a purpose. You know, I call it opera with a conscience.
Yeah. Oh, ooh, that's
And
beautiful.
that's Mary Cole Dawson. That's Soldier Songs. That's Dead Man Walking. It's all these things that seek to sort of address some sort of cultural or societal issue.
Yeah, and Margaret Garner, that's interesting too,
Yeah.
because that was out of all the slave antebellum stories, that one had fallen into obscurity too.
Mm.
And that one was a hugely important story because it brought into question, well, first of all, it was the most dramatic, the most expensive of its time, but more importantly, it brought into the question of, would she be tried for destruction of property or murder? And if it were murder, then you had to acknowledge that she was a human being. This was huge because our Constitution still says that Black people are 3/5. Like
Yeah.
it's still saying that. So like this was a gigantic issue, right?
I mean, it was ahead of its time. I mean, there was nothing else really happening. I mean, it was like we had Dead Man here and in 2000, and but like, you know, when we were coming up, a new opera was like Susanna, you know, and like the fact that we have so many operas now that are being written
It's
every
true.
single year.
So you've done a lot of new works then,
Oh,
huh?
so yeah. I mean, New Works is responsible for the career I have. It was because of my work in Dead Man and in Out of Darkness and all these other sort of big, sort of dramatic stories that gave me some capital. And opera companies took me seriously about Rigoletto and about Scarpia and Jack Rance and things. So it was flipped for me. I think a lot of people come to new music from other things. For me, new music was my gateway to a career.
Hey, look, so was that conscious or that just sort of play out like that?
Just played. I mean, it's of course what I love doing most. I mean, I love doing news stories, things that connect with audiences in their own language. It's my favorite thing to do. Period. I mean, I love Rigoletto and Scarpia, but I would rather sing a new piece every day of the week, just because I know that I can reach people, different people, in a different way.
And
And
how is that for your voice? What does your voice say about standard repertoire and about
I
new
think
music?
one always helps the other. You know, one like I have for with like singing things in English and understanding like that literally like in the moment every time the emotional landscape of the text is something I didn't experience in Italian, German, and French rep because I didn't have that emotion. I didn't know how to get that emotional knowledge really. And then
That's
when I
very
get in English
interesting.
and felt that feeling, and then I had to go back to the other rep, and it was nothing. There was nothing there, and so I had to really figure out how to dig deep and have the same connection that I had in the English repertoire.
Wow.
It was
I remember
flipped.
on Margaret Garner that I didn't really have any coachings.
Yeah,
And that's what I remember like, oh, I know this language already.
it's funny, right?
Yeah, I know this story already.
Yeah.
Like I actually have the information
Mhm.
already here. And that was something that really struck me.
Yeah.
Well, that's very, very, very interesting, Mike. I mean, that's really something,
Yeah.
what
I
you
mean, it's
said.
when I can go to a show and I can do about a veterans issue, and guys will stand up who hadn't talked about their PTSD or anything, not with their family, not with their wives, or nothing. They'll stand up and testify
Yeah.
at the talkback and be crying. And these, I mean, you're talking about these boomer dudes, white hair, cigarette stained, you know, big old cracks in their faces and just the toughest, meanest dudes you could imagine. And they're just completely like undone by an opera. I mean, that's that kind of power for me is a thing that, I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't have discovered those things, I don't know if I'd still be doing this because it's those things that really gave me the fuel and the ratification that I was doing something meaningful with my life. You know, I mean, it's similar to what you have all this capital, Denyce, that you've earned over your entire career. And you could spend that capital any way you wanted to. And you're choosing to spend it this way, which I think is admirable and incredible. And so it's heartening to know that there are people that are actually doing that rather than just focusing on, the me show,
I think that my career has been about getting me to this moment.
Yeah.
I think that all of that stuff that happened was so that people would return the email, pick up the telephone, all that stuff. I think that, I swear, I feel like I was born for this moment,
Yeah.
what we created with this foundation, and all of that stuff just helped to, all of that capital, as you said, is what enabled me to go into this, for all of those experiences, everything that's happened over all these 35 years in the industry has been for this moment. I feel like I have truly found my purpose,
Yeah.
like why I'm here. And I'm grateful. I'm so incredibly grateful to that, and grateful to my students.
Well, do you find that it allows you to sort of experience joy in a different way, than
Totally.
you did before? Like, because the joy and the ecstasy of performing, and there's adulation that's kind of pointless, but the feeling and all that stuff, to be able to extract joy from some other type of relationship and some of that's still part of your art, I think is fantastic.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. And I was really touched by what you just said, that had you not had that experience, with perhaps in some of the talkbacks with some of these veterans, and seeing what the power of music can do and how transformative that can be, and
Mhm.
how that can give people an outlet and access to tap into what's, in the bedrock of their, foundation, that they've not had a way to sort of release and
Mhm.
express and confront, all that stuff that's when, that's what this whole thing is about. And people know that, as I said earlier, I'm sure there've been people throughout your career who said to you, I heard you sing and this happened. And we've all had that experience, like you turn on the radio in the car, maybe it's not the radio anymore, but whatever it is, right? And you hear something that was meant for your heart,
Yeah.
was meant for your state of being, that moment, that something just, it spoke directly to you, um, and that is what is so great, because this stuff is like fourth dimension stuff. I mean, this stuff is like incredible. Thank God for it,
Yeah.
thank God for it, because it is what makes us human beings. It's what allows us to get past all the minutia of like all the stuff, and be able to connect to another human being,
Well,
right?
the magic of it is that a book, you can read a book and learn about a subject. You can go to a play and sort of get a sense of it, but it's not until you go to like an opera or even musical theater, but the really intense stuff, where you understand the emotional. You can learn the landscape of a map or the ins and outs of the dates and all that stuff, but it's not till you get to the opera and to the music of a time that you understand the emotional landscape. Because emotions, and for me, like emotions and music are cousins, because they're both invisible. I can show you what sad does to somebody, but I can't show you sad. And I can show you what music does to people, but I can't show you music because the dots on the page are nonsense anyway. It's all invisible. So that's why it's so
It's the
magical.
things that make us alive. It is what causes us to vibrate. And that's what being alive is being able to vibrate, and like just that's what the world needs are people who are alive and in, to their lives and present and there every second,
Yeah.
and music is one way. Music is a way that the arts in general. I mean, when I think about the pandemic and everything that happened, what was everybody doing? Watching movies, right? But we were connected to the arts
Yeah.
more than anything. It was very interesting, that incredible dichotomy of like, okay, we're considered to be, a threat, but the fact of the matter is, that's the thing that kept us from going crazy.
Yeah.
It was connecting to that because people were like, that's what we were doing
Yeah.
to 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 feel our humanity, to connect with other individuals, to feel alive, to vibrate, we were all like at home, still, the world had our attention,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, what a thing. I think we're incredibly fortunate to have known this experience.
I've said that too, that we're lucky. I know it seems terrible, but who wants to be an artist in the 1980s when everything was fine? Like we're an artist now. We're like we always say, wouldn't it have been great to be an artist in the turn of the century, of the 19th, 20th centuries, or wouldn't it have been great to be an artist during in France, in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s in Germany? Wouldn't that have been great to be an artist? Yeah, it's always great to be an artist when you're in these crazy, tumultuous times. That's what we're here for. We're the guides. Come with us. We'll show you how to feel.
That's right. That's right. I love that. That's awesome. So are you going to go back now? What happens after the summertime?
Well, Meg's going to the Met. She's going to be singing in Boris. And so
Awesome.
I'm going to go up to Colorado to see a buddy of mine, spend 3 or 4 days kind of resetting. And then me and the dog is going to go back home. And I've got a couple of jobs in the fall. Next year's kind of sparse because of
Right.
resettling and stuff. So I've got a little more time off.
Where's home, Mike?
Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh, right. Who do you say killed in Columbia Judge? When I did that was a piece from The Passion of Jonathan Wade. When I did my young artist apprenticeship was with Houston Grand Opera and Carlisle Floyd. Then you mentioned Susanna earlier. Carlisle Floyd was composer in residence there. And so we really workshopped a lot of his pieces, but
That must have been wild.
fabulous,
Oh, man.
fabulous. He used to come to my voice lessons and sit there with me. He wanted to learn about voice. And then the next day I'd sing something from Bilby's Doll, or from Wuthering Heights and all these, fabulous pieces, The Passion of Jonathan Wade, which he was working on, there. So that was incredible. But anyway, he talks about Columbia there in the opera. So that's what made me think
Yeah,
about that.
it's our family's there. It's like her brother lives a mile away. So, our heart's in Colorado, but our mind and our family and our network was in South Carolina. So that's where we went. We made adult decisions.
Uh-huh. That's right. Very, very good. And what I loved about you is that you brought your pup with you,
Oh,
to, yeah.
otherwise I would just stay. I would never leave the house, and I'd be like like a troll in my cave. She gets me out. Poke, poke, let's go. Come on.
Yeah, but what it says to me is that even though you're on an engagement, you're about living your life
Mhm.
and having your life. Because I think that, oftentimes when we get on an engagement, it's really just about, like doing the work and going to the theater, going home, make sure you sleep, make sure you eat. No, but
Yeah,
what I saw you do was like, this is my life. Like this is our life that's happening right now,
yeah.
you know. And I remember that made a
Especially when I
huge,
go to Europe, I get stuck inside. Because I feel like I'm just always waiting to go to the rehearsal or waiting to go to the stage, and it's really. I mean, I do go out and do things, but I kind of have to force myself. It's easy for us to get sort of like locked into stasis. I think I like to bring
yeah.
a family with me when I can, so we can go, so I can see the town like a tourist instead of.
And also that this is our life and our lives are happening. I remember, at the beginning of my career, I'd come home and I saw my cousin who had gotten so big and tall that I didn't even recognize him anymore. And I remembered, and I always kept thinking like, well, when I get home, I'm going to do this. And when I get home, I'm going to do that. And then I realized that like my life was going by. Like I was thinking that I was going to start living my life when
So,
I got home from the engagement. But the life was actually happening while I was on the engagement,
oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh, that hits me right in the stomach, man. I tell you.
Yeah.
That's true. That is 100% true.
Yeah.
Wait,
And
well, I'll be happy later.
wow. Wow. I'll
Yeah.
be happy later.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is really, really something.
Yeah.
But I still think we're incredibly, incredibly fortunate to be able to do what it is we do.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that it was a climb, and it is a climb. You do have to earn being there. I would say, and when I what I mean by earn is like, I don't think that necessarily for first of all, I support everybody. Like
Yeah.
I support everybody. Because I think whether you like them or not, whether you like their voices or not, whatever you think, nobody got there because they're not passing out careers. If anybody's there doing anything, it's because they worked and earned being there. Period. End of the story. You cannot like them. You can think they sing like whatever. They're not passing out careers. They're
Yeah.
not just, hey, you want one? No. That is a long slog that you cannot fast track. You got to go through the steps and you got to be able to do it. Got to be able to do,
Number one.
number one,
Number
like
one.
it's not who you know. Like either you can sing Rigoletto or you can't.
Yep.
Period.
Yeah.
End of the story. And in order for you to be able to sing it, you've got to put in the work.
Yeah.
You got to put in the time. You can't just jump up and do that. Right?
And I
So
did it in 5 days the last time I did it.
did you really?
Oh man.
But you did that role in 5, but the career and the preparation, that's
Oh, yeah.
years.
That's all. That's all. That's all it
Yeah.
is. All the preparation was to get you ready for these jump in crazy moments where you don't have any time to do anything and you're just going on instinct the whole entire time. You're not really thinking about anything. You just go. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm really inspired by how you've chosen to spend your capital, and I'm really excited to see how this foundation is going to develop and the number of stories I know are going to, because we're American history is completely underutilized in our art form, I think, because there's so many rich narratives and so many rich stories, and I'm so thrilled that you are able to sort of crack the door on a mine that had been closed down, and so we can open that mine up and get some of those jewels out so we can all enjoy them again. And I just think that's really wonderful, and I want to thank you for that.
My heart feels like it's going to burst in love for you. So thank you so much. I mean, I appreciate your giving me this moment and creating this moment to talk about it, because part of it is just people have to know about it, right?
Right.
People have to know about it. So like we're super, super young and we are forming it, but it is coming together. We've got like 13 dedicated people who are on that. While we were there in Glamour Glass, we seated our board of directors. So, we've got like 23 people who are like determined, to help us to govern this body and to help move this organization forward, and the stories and all of the different things that that we want to do to be able to serve, and not just like Mary Cardwell Dawson to restore her to her rightful prominence in history, but so many others like her, and to be able to tell these very rich stories that make us who we are,
Mhm.
right? That make all of us who we are as Americans, as human beings.
Yeah.
And if you look at so the Met's going to reopen this season, but we had a dark period. But before, I mean, the theaters were dark, is what I meant. But the season before, if you look at what sold, it was Akhenaten and Porgy and Bess. Now
Yeah.
we know Bohem isn't going anywhere. Notze is not going anywhere. However, there is a hunger for the telling of new and different stories.
Yeah.
That's important. We can see that the people want that.
Yeah.
And the same way that you feel like when you sing it to be able to, I mean, I know we've all had that experience when people say like, I don't know what's going on. I didn't know what y'all was singing about, but like,
It was pretty.
yeah, it was pretty and I was loving it. But there's a whole other, type of awareness now where people are saying, that totally, resonated with me. I know exactly what was going on here. That was a personal experience. I'm so happy. So we're seeing that happen now too. We're seeing that get folded into the audience experience,
Yeah.
and that is huge. And maybe that's what it was like. Maybe that's what it was like, for in Joe Green's time, Giuseppe
I
Verdi,
mean, they were all writing tons of operas and shows. I mean, that's the thing I always say is like we have to encourage our composers now because we're losing stories, we're losing music because you need the proliferation. You need a ton. You got to throw a ton of stuff on the table so that the ones that are really special can go. And we may be. I mean, I don't know how many decades we went. Like the '80s were rough for new works. 70s and '80s and '90s, it was like, who cares? Let's do ABCs.
right.
How many stories did we lose? How many great pieces did we lose? And so I'm just glad that there's folks like you out here that are giving us more fallow or not more ground and fertilizing the soil so we actually have something to pick, and
Wow.
carry on to the next generation.
And I think that America's really being a leader on that,
Yeah.
because I have friends, like my European friends, like every time they come to America, they're like,
What is
you
this?
guys are like crushing it with all the new operas and stuff. And I think, Opera America has been a huge champion of really supporting, new works and promoting composers and young composers and all, we're in the midst of watching this change happen. We're seeing women conductors and, all sorts of things happening right now. We're in the middle of this exciting period, like you talked about earlier, like when I read about Mozart and like, oh my God, Mozart and Haydn were friends. Like they used to hang out, like, right. Like that must've been really something, like the Mighty Five, like when all those guys were hanging out together must've been really something. But we're in this period now where there's this explosion going on of, new stories being told, the Met's getting ready to premiere, the first African-American composer, Terrence Blanchard, whom I love. Shout out to Terrence, yay. Fire Shut Up in My Bones. That's gigantic.
Yeah.
First time in the Mets history, opening the season with something like that. Like we're here right now for this moment. This is awesome.
Yeah.
To be alive right now, to be a part of this and to feel this and to, so it's an exciting time.
Well, I tell you what, that's a perfect vibe on which to end this because I feel right now like, hey, let's go out and do some things.
Yeah, baby, let's go.
Well, Denyce, I want to thank you so much for coming on this show. You're always a pleasure to speak with and so kind and so generous with all of your time and your resources. And so I want to thank you so much
Well, I have enjoyed getting to know you more. This has been a real gift to me. At first I was tired, like I just come home. I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like I just want to sleep. But like you have energized me. I feel so great now. And so I want to thank you for what you've deposited and given to me,
Right on. Right on.
And the greatest is the opportunity to get to know you more and the work that you're doing and what you're putting out there and giving out there to the world. So thank you for all the service.
Good role models through the years. All righty. Thank you so much.
All right, baby, do your thing.
Got it.
Love you. Thanks so much, Mike.
You bet.